I hate reality. It's the one thing that keeps shattering my dreams. I don't care what they tell me. I don't want to touch grass. I want to cast fireballs. Apparently, there are places you could go to learn magic, but in reality, they are more about good vibes and tarot cards than incinerating my foes. So I settled for the next best thing and taught children how to incinerate my foes in today's game, Spellcaster University. Spellcaster University is a comfy game that's easy to chill out with, but there's enough challenge that you have to pay attention and stay focused. You get to build your dream school just how you want, but you better do it quick before the Lord of Evil destroys it like a snotty kid kicking over a sandcastle. Due to reasons, the Lord of Evil just really has it out for wizards, and every time he and his army revive, your school is first on his hit list. If you did your job, he gets beaten back, but you also get to start over from scratch. And when you start, you really have nothing, just the bare basics like a dorm and a dining hall, and a couple of dollars to buy some more. You are responsible for the classrooms, the food, sleep, and entertainment of your students, as well as your staff, all the magical artifacts that go inside, and even the houses your students will be joining. Most of the mundane rooms can be purchased with gold, but most of the magical things like classrooms need to be drawn from the magic decks. And the only way to draw from these decks is to research that element, and yes, most of the ways to research those elements can only be found in their deck. Which is why I was stuck without any nature magic for my first few hours because the gold deck decided I wasn't worthy of nature magic. The customization in this game is pretty good, but I will warn you, I think it might be too good. Naming each student and teacher is fun when you first start off, but as the game progresses, it could quickly spiral out of control.
We'll name this half Marlin Jr., and then this half Coral Jr.
So it's just not that kind of game. It's fun to name the occasional character, but there's far too much going on to pay attention to any one person. Naming the houses are fun though. Those stick around a lot longer. My personal favorite is my first one, named after all the cliché archetypes. The good guys, the bad guys, the nerds, and the stoners. And I didn't realize just how well it matches up with the Harry Potter houses until just now. Besides changing their appearance, you can focus on what each house specializes in. This is your main and pretty much only way of directly controlling what your students do. Everything else is like trying to guide a fat guy through a maze by making donut sounds. Tired students will walk right past empty beds. They will be bored before they even enter school, and they will somehow manage to avoid accidentally stepping into a classroom for 3 whole years. Thankfully, you could buy a couple of useful tools, like jail cells to imprison all delinquents, shackles for reminding the other students what's in store for them, and guard dogs for biting the heels of anyone nearby who so much as thinks of slacking off. I actually tell my students discipline is a low priority, not as a mercy, but as a dare. Besides discipline, you also need to manage other students' needs, like food and mental wellness. Construct enough healthful buildings for this, and in theory, your students will learn a lot more effectively. I wouldn't know. I never actually made my students' well-being my priority, which is why my students walk all the way to the nearest town just to get some rest, as if the 5 beds for the entire college isn't enough. This, I believe, is the worst-case scenario for not providing enough buildings. Nothing really terrible will happen, but you do lose a lot of valuable time as they slog all the way back and forth. That said, terrible things absolutely can happen. Magic mishaps occur all the time. What happens varies wildly, but all of them are quite bad.
But I got a team of pumpkin heads!
Oh, also death. Death can happen. Piss off the wrong factions enough or fail to appease the orcs in general, and you will be invaded. The good news is most of your school carries on as normal and don't lose any progress. The bad news is for the 12-year-old who was standing by the entrance when all this went down. Funny thing I learned is the teachers are invincible. The 3 students around them are not. So that kind of combat is generally to be avoided, but there's also a second, far more in-depth battle system to discover once your school starts to come together. Eventually, one of the friendly factions will ask you to delve into a dungeon, and you can send 4 kids to kill all the locals they run across in search of loot to bring back. It starts out quite easy, but every floor the enemies get tougher until you turn back or get wiped out. It's theoretically possible to get to the end, just like it's possible to beat Tetris, but you won't. Which kids you send is very important. You want to send your best ones so they will have the most helpful skills in the dungeon, but you don't want to lose your students with the most potential to not be a huge disappointment when they graduate. Each of the 15 magic students study will give a different type of attack or passive ability, so you have to think hard about what skill combinations you want to bring. You could bring a well-rounded team of healing, blocking, stunning, and DPS, or you could send all your dark students out to lifesteal their way through the dungeons until they are one-shot. You get all the loot you collect regardless if any of your students remain to bring it back. So as you might imagine, my expeditions rarely had survivors. Their parents could take comfort in the fact that my school has a new dormitory for other parents' kids to sleep in. Every so often, you get to communicate with one of the several different factions located around your school. Get enough favor and you get some very valuable passive bonuses or more dialogue options open up in different situations, but lose enough favor and they will make your life harder or possibly outright attack you. This is easier to let happen than you think, as they will occasionally demand resources you just spent seconds ago or ask for things you never had a hope of obtaining minutes into your run. On top of that, sometimes one faction will ask for a favor at the expense of a different faction. In these situations, I always encourage a fair and equal compromise. Your goal varies from location to location, but in general, you are always focused on pumping out the most educated students who can contribute the most to society, mainly in the form of fighting the Lord of Evil. Every alumni gives your school a slight bonus depending on what they accomplish, either in the form of resources to spend or a permanent upgrade that'll last the whole campaign. For each successful student you launch into the world, your prestige grows, attracting more students to apply. Particularly successful students will draw more prestige, while failures and serial killers hailing from your school will keep applicants away. This can be difficult as students will find any and all excuses to not study. All those amenities you built for the students take a while to travel to and take even longer to recharge their needs. And just because a classroom has been built doesn't mean the teacher is present and ready to teach. And just because the teacher is there doesn't mean they won't grow bored and walk out in the middle of teaching, forcing the kids to find something else to do. The teachers are interesting as they generally have all the same needs as students, but can meet most of them in the teachers' lounges. The one exception is coffee. They don't need a lot, but they will strike if you don't buy them that second coffee maker. Just like in real life, each teacher ranges in quality from poor to excellent. Unlike real life, they might also have qualities such as fun, inspiring, or job lover. This coupled with negative traits, alignment, and union status, and there's a lot to consider when hiring new staff. Students also have just as much going on, but unless they are poor and stupid, I see little reason not to take just about everyone in, though there is a lot to consider when deciding which house to assign them to. You want them to study any magic they are predisposed to, and you want them to study under teachers with similar alignment. Some students will only study for 3 years, which will be helpful for quickly getting up your prestige, while others will train for 7 years and will hopefully provide you with solid benefits somewhere down the line. There are so many variables to consider, and being in the right place at the right time will still count for a lot of each student's experience. In my first campaign, I only created one archmage, and that guy was a dumbass. I never would have expected to amount to much. While there are some small things you could do to slow the Lord of Evil's resurrection, the end will inevitably come, and you better hope you weren't just one dragon rider short away from accomplishing your objectives. For every objective you complete, your next run in that campaign will receive a higher tier bonus. This will hopefully counteract the additional curse you will have to contend with as well. Get too many crappy runs in a campaign and you'll suffer under the huge weight of all your failures. Succeed enough and the campaign can actually become very easy as your school snowballs into a powerhouse of mana generation. So there's a lot to discover. I haven't even started on all the different races, challenges, horrifying disfigurations, jobs, location, and so much more. One thing I highly suggest you discover for yourself is that like and subscribe button. I am but a small, simple creator and every button press really makes a difference. Also, I make other videos. Some of them might even make you smile.